everyone. We are here at the Spice Basket, and we are here as members of the National Celebrations Committee. My name is Livingston Nelson, CEO of the Grenada Cultural Foundation, and here also present as members of the National Celebration Committee is the Chief Cultural Officer, Mr. Kelvin Jacob, and Ms. Akeda Ventu, representing SEDU. We are here with some esteemed members, some of them very professional, but everyone is here to give their view on the topic that we are going to be discussing tonight. Before we formally start, I would like to call on Ms. Connie Anju, to lead us in prayer. So can we all stand?
Good night, everyone. So let us pray in the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. Heavenly Father, we thank you for this opportunity of being here tonight. We thank you for all the synchronicities that brought us to here together. Lord, as we are small in number, we accept and believe that where two or three are gathered, that you are here in our midst, and we accept and believe that. We thank you, Lord, for this opportunity. We thank you, Lord, for the persons here to present. We thank you, Lord, for the persons online. We ask you, Lord, to be with us. We ask you, Lord, that tonight, that we would learn something and be able to share something. And in all that we do, O Lord, we pray that your holy will be done. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen.
Thank you, Ms. Andrew. The National Celebration Committee has embarked on this program with the main goal and responsibility of trying to lift the awareness of the Grenadian people. It's 188 years since emancipation, and emancipation should mean something to us. So we have embarked on a series of programs apart from this tonight activity. We are also going to be at the Grenville bus terminus July the 31st, where we are going to observe what we consider to be a watch night. It is really replaying and recreating what the slaves were feeling then, just anticipating that next day. So what we would want to do up there is to celebrate. And we are going to invite all the religious groupings to participate in that celebration. The Baptists, the Rastafarians, the Catholic, the Anglicans, all the churches to be represented, to make joyous song, knowing that the next day on that first was supposed to be a day of liberation. And on the first, and for a matter of fact, at the end of that, we are going to end with a drum circle, where we are going to have several drumming groups from here within Grenada, but we're also going to be joined by a next group out of Tobago, Jabali Entertainers, extremely well-versed drumming group that is going to join us to help again bring the curtain down on that night. On the 1st of August, we started to be celebrating the 1st of August officially from last year, the Celebrations Committee would embark on having a breakfast very early in the morning and in Grenville car park. This would be followed by around 3 o'clock exhibition in the bus terminus, arts and craft, and of course food would be on display, our local arts and craft, clothing, drumming, etc. Later on, we are going to be having a parade, flambeau march, and we are going to be accompanied by 4 of the nation's drum corps, starting from Subies coming on to Grenville. And this year, we are going to be having some community groups participating in those activities, starting from Subies and coming on to Grenville. So for you all there, make sure you are prepared to come out and participate in that activity. Later on, in the bus terminus, we still will be having the pan while some people want to stay in the bus terminus and others go to join the parade. We are going to have the Rainbow City All Stars playing in the bus terminus from 5 to 6. And from 5:45, the parade would start with a float. We have conceptualized a float looking at depicting the history or the journey of Grenada from slavery to now. So again, we are encouraging you to do that. Apart from that, we're going to be having the the Grand Bras community group. We expect to have Bonnie School participating, Spice dancers, Spice Land dancers, Balthazar. We expect a number of different groups coming to participate in that parade, community and other school groups. So again, this is a moment I encourage you to come out and participate in the Flambeau March on to Sobeys. And then later on, we're going to have a short official program, and then we are going to go stateside where we have performances from the many groups, performing groups in Grenada. Again, and then being joined now in full force by our brothers and sisters out of Tobago, the Jabali entertainers. So I think I've said enough. Tonight we are here, and we are here with some very competent presenters, and they are going to be led by one Miss Zelika Peters, who is the facilitator. I'm going to leave this table because Miss Zelika Peters are going to tell us a little bit more about the topic tonight, the rules of engagement, and she's going to introduce all the guests, 2 online and 3 presently with us. So I would want to turn over now to Ms. Zelika Peters, who would take the floor from here. Thank you.
Okay, so thank you very much, Mr. Nelson. Tonight, the topic at hand is what are the signs of an emancipated people? And before we jump straight into the discussion, I'd like to introduce my esteemed panelists. So to my extreme left, we have Mr. Evan Bola. Evan Bola is a dedicated Grenadian community activist, historian, and agriculturalist based in Tivoli, St. Andrew. Deeply aware of his heritage as a product of the Caribbean plantation economy and post-plantocracy landscape, he consciously claims a peasant identity to remain radically grounded in the struggles, resilience, and triumphs of the working class majority. While trained in history, Mr. Bola chooses to channel his intellectual background into active farming, viewing sustainable agriculture as a powerful tool for community self-resilience and historical reclamation. As a grassroots community activist, he works tirelessly to empower local voices and bridge the gap between historic structural challenges and modern communal solutions. Mr. Evan Bola. I'm also going to introduce Ms. Shania Chase. Shania is an educator, entrepreneur, recording artist, and community advocate from the beautiful sister island of Carriacou and Petit Martinique. She is passionate about empowering young minds through education and hosts after-school reading classes to help children strengthen their literacy skills and build confidence. Beyond education, Shania is an accomplished entrepreneur and has served on multiple cultural committees in Carriacou and Petit Martinique, including chairperson of the Kayak Mass Queen Show Committee and deputy chair of the Carriacou Regatta Committee, contributing to the preservation and promotion of the island's rich cultural heritage. As a recording artist, she uses music to inspire and celebrate Caribbean culture through her work in education, business, music, and community service. Shania continues to make a meaningful impact, inspiring others through her leadership, creativity, and commitment to uplifting her community. Ms. Chase. To my immediate left, we have Mr. Carl Andal. Carl Andal is a distinguished Grenadian educator, administrator, and sports executive with a lifelong commitment to national development. He serves as the principal of the MacDonald College and the president of the Grenada Association of Principals of Secondary Schools, driving academic excellence and technological advancement in secondary education. A versatile leader, Mr. Andal also shapes national athletic and welfare policies as the first vice president of the Grenada Football Association and the chairman of the Grenada Teachers Union Group Medical Plan, Mr. Carl Andal. Our next two panelists are joining us via Zoom. We have Dr. Candia Mitchell. Dr. Candia Mitchell Hall is a tenured lecturer of Caribbean culture, history, heritage, and memory at the Institute of the Caribbean Studies at the University of the West Indies, Mona campus. She is also a campus coordinator of the foundation courses, Caribbean Civilization, and coordinator of her department's mentorship program, Project 4.0. She has presented her works on Grenadian studies at several international conferences, including her ideas on T.A. Marichaud. Her research focus includes the memories and heritage of the Grenadian peoples and their revolutionary histories, the meanings of emancipation and historic resistance through cultural performances, including Jab Jab. Currently, she is working on a book manuscript on Theophilus Albert Marichaud, and Dr. Mitchell is a proud Grenadian daughter of the soil and Caribbeanist at heart. And last but certainly not least, we have Dr. Damian E. Greaves. Dr. Damian E. Greaves is a public health scholar, health systems leader, academic, and public servant whose work has consistently engaged questions of equity, human development, governance, and social transformation. He currently serves as Chief Executive Officer at the Millennium Heights Medical Complex in St. Lucia, where he provides strategic leadership for one of the country's most important public health institutions. He is also Professor Emeritus of St. George's University, with advanced academic preparation in health services management and policy, public health, social sciences, history, sociology, and education. Dr. Greaves has published and presented on health equity, health systems, strengthening social determinations of health, and the development challenges of small island states. His professional journey has included service as a parliamentarian, educator, researcher, and senior executive, reflecting a lifelong commitment to public service and institutional advancement. Of particular relevance to this Emancipation Day panel, Dr. Greaves has contributed to regional reparatory justice work, having served on the preparatory committee and subsequently in an advisory capacity to the Grenada Reparations Commission. His reflections on the hallmarks of an emancipated people draw from the wide body of experience linking emancipation not only to historical memory, but also to dignity, self-definition, justice, disciplined nation building, and the continuing responsibility to shape institutions that serve and uplift our people. Dr. Damian E. Greaves. So first of all, welcome to our audience, both in person and online, and welcome to our esteemed panel. So we're gonna dive right into the topic, which, as we said earlier, is what are the signs of an emancipated people? So we're gonna give each person about 5 to 10 minutes to just share their ideas, and then we'll dive deeper into the discussion. So, Mr. Bola, I'd like to start with you and your thoughts on what are the signs of an emancipated people.
Well, thank you very much for inviting me to this very important discussion this evening. When I accepted the offer, I told the person who asked me to be part of the panel that my approach is very radical, out of the ordinary, and he said that would not be a problem. So I accepted the offer to come as a farmer, first and foremost. Ladies and gentlemen, emancipation, once we speak of emancipation, the first thing that comes to mind is liberation. And I tend not to go all the way back to slavery, 1834 and 38 after emancipation and so forth, but to focus on the recent activities of Caribbean peoples. Of course, one has to take into consideration, do you speak only about liberation in an individual sense, or do you actually make it collective emancipation? Do we think of emancipation on a regional level, or do we look at it in an internationalist level, scope? And for the majority of us who grew up in the 1960s, and as young, probably teenagers, 1970s thereafter, we had a very radical upbringing, very radical training. And over the years, that has disappeared as we had some setbacks in the Caribbean, of course, here in Grenada, most of all in 1983. And people have been very scared to talk about liberation in that radical sense. And we have to get back to the point where, as a people, if we are fully liberated, we do not have to be afraid to express our concerns and to strive for self-determination on all levels. What we see happening to us as a people is that economically we are losing the battle that we're supposed to have won since 1834 and 38 after the emancipation of slavery. We have been colonized during that period, and we are still continue to be colonized. But Molly made it quite clear, if you want to emancipate yourself, you have to emancipate yourself in your mind. And we have to focus on educating our people, educating our nation, the entire region, to be able to achieve that type of liberation that we are supposed to have to make us free. We cannot be free as long as we continue to be dominated by the external forces. I'm speaking here clearly about the internet influencing our culture, influencing our people, the media influencing our culture, influencing our peoples. What we have to do as activists is to find a way to redirect the energies of our young people, even our parents too, from the external influences, and see how we can go back to our cultural roots. It's a very difficult fight. And liberation, I think, could be very, very difficult to really achieve. And except we understand that, we would not be able to make much progress. We have been dominated by colonial powers for the longest while, and that has not changed. Economically, we are not free, we are not independent. And once you're not independent, you can have this sort of a sovereignty that we have been struggling for the longest while. Our economies are actually hinge to the economies of the very said powers that kept us in subjection for so very long. We have moved from Spain, we have moved from the French, we have moved from the British, and now I think without any question, any doubt, that we are dominated by the United States. In the 1960s and 70s, 80s, we were free to talk about an anti-imperialist approach towards freeing the Caribbean from the clutches of U.S. imperialism. We have not been able to do that. And today we are faced with neo-colonial powers, and conservatives. It's very difficult to escape their grip. Our economies are tied to a much more powerful economies. It's very difficult, very, very difficult for us to try to escape that. As a matter of fact, any group, any political party that consciously chose what we term as an alternative path to development have been crushed. We have a lot of Caribbean intellectuals who have tried, like Walter Rodney. It's important to know who they are, find their books, read about them so you have an idea as to what their thoughts were like. You have C.L.R. James, for example, Black Jacobins. Go back to Walter Rodney, Grounding with My Brothers, the most important book of all, How Europe Underdeveloped Africa. You have Franz Fanon, excellent book on liberation. And, we have to be able to read that. Even Dr. Eric Williams, Capitalism and Slavery, very powerful book that helped shape the resistance movement in the Caribbean and have grounded many, Caribbean intellectuals and progressive. Michael Manley, can't forget him. Brothers like Tim Hector in Antigua. We have Rosie Douglas in Dominica. We spoke Michael Manley in Jamaica. We have today, most importantly, respected around the world is a tradition that we are losing, but some people are signing up. A sister like Mia Motley in Barbados, who is not afraid to take on the establishment. Amazingly, we have lost the guts. A lot of Caribbean politicians are afraid to follow in the footsteps of Mia Motley. Maybe rightfully so, because we have some very powerful economic forces in the north. If you don't toe the line, you know what happens? You're crushed. They have the economic power and they have the military power to put you in your place. But admirably, Mia Motley is not afraid. And I'm saying for a sister, we need more Mia Motleys in the Caribbean. What we have found over the years, and you have to excuse me if I be so blunt, that a lot of men, the brothers, are hiding in the background. And you have more female activists coming forward and carrying the banner of progressive politics and progressive resistance forward. And we really have to support them in the very best way that we can. Ladies and gentlemen, brothers and sisters, liberation is very important for us to survive as a people going forward. We have to pay attention to the economic liberation that we need. I think brothers like Malcolm X said, if you are not liberated economically, then you're not liberated at all. And looking at the Caribbean nations, the Caribbean countries, looking at the people in Grenada, if I should focus here, you ask the question, why have I chosen to identify with the farmers of this country, the working people? I think the Bible said very clearly, I don't have to be socialist here to say that, but those who are well do not need a physician. And the people who need a physician the most, as far as I'm concerned, are the poor and working people of our country. We call them the masses before. Very rare you find people want to refer them to the masses because it takes you back to an era that some people don't like to identify with. But the masses are our people. I grew up on the plantation, I grew up around the plantation, and looking at farmers today, these are the people who need physicians. And my advice to all those who are willing to participate in lifting our country, I would ask you to please focus on the people who need help the most, both economically, politically, culturally, and socially. We need to put in place some very serious, and I quote, progressive programs that will lift them up from where they are and bring them up to a level that we all will be proud of. I'll stop here for now.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bola. So I'm going to go right down the line. I'm going to pose the same question. Shania, what are the signs of an emancipated people in your opinion?
Good evening. All right. Good evening, everyone. Thank you, moderator, for such a lovely introduction. It is indeed a pleasure to be here this evening, or probably I should say tonight, to join such an esteemed panel. Um, I had to brave the seas all the way from Carriacou, and you know this time of the year the water is terrible. But I could not be here tonight. When I heard the topic that we will be discussing tonight, I was more than happy to join the panel because it gives me an opportunity to speak about emancipation from the eyes of the younger folks, from the eyes of the folks who were not there in 1960, or the eyes of the folks who were not there during the revolution. But we have adopted emancipation. We were born into it. And we can see from that standpoint what emancipation is to us. What emancipation is multifaceted. It is not simply one thing. And I will start first with personally. No, you cannot adopt any form of emancipation unless you are content with yourself. If you are not happy with who you are, you must accept yourself. You must be free within to be free outside. And personal emancipation brings us to culture, because culture is part of who we are. These are the behaviors that we do every day. And Grenada, Carriacou, and Petit Martinique are islands rich in culture. So we cannot be emancipated or claim to be emancipated unless we are fully partaking in the culture, not just partaking, but understanding what each aspect is about. In addition to that, let's look at education. Now, one of the things that was truly amazing in the negative sense about slavery is that we were not allowed to be educated. And that was enough to keep us in bondage. Today, we see that with the improvement of technology and including technology in education, we can see education from a different standpoint. Once we can learn new languages, learn how to do new things, we can start to become emancipated. It doesn't end there, because emancipation is a continuous process. It is continuing to act on the emancipation. It's not just a date. It's not just a single celebration once a year. It is a life. It's a life practice. It's a livelihood. In addition to education, let's look at economic independence or emancipation. And I loved how Mr. Bola spoke about it. There is no way you can be emancipated if you don't earn your own money. There is no way you can be emancipated if a country is totally dependent on imports rather than creating your own finances. You process your own things. And I was so pleased the other day when I looked at the news and I saw that we were producing so many things in Grenada, Carriacou, and Petit Martinique. And this is where we start. This is where we begin to be independent. We are on the right path. So, Madam Moderator, this is just a little of what emancipation is about. As I said, it's not just one thing. It's a continuous process. It is an everyday thing. Sometimes we think of emancipation as just 5 facets now, and then tomorrow we discover that there is a new facet that we can also adopt to become truly emancipated. So as I close, let me just reiterate that emancipation is truly something that starts within and something that we practice throughout our daily lives. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Ms. Chase. Mr. Ander, we move the question to you.
Okay. Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
Right, when Mr. Nelson contacted me and I saw the topic, immediately I jumped at the opportunity. To me, as a historian, if we're going to have discussion on this, all tomorrow morning we'll be here. Yeah, because it's a very interesting topic. It's a very wide topic. In my introduction, they said a lot of things about me, but one of the things I must mention is that before I became the principal, I had the privilege of teaching history for 27 years, which to me is a very long time. And as a history teacher, first and foremost, I will know that in Grenada there is a general reluctance of persons to learn history. And that's where I want to start, because, you know, we're asking of the signs of our emancipated people. But I think initially we still should look at the ravages of slavery, how slavery affected us. So that's where I want to take you back. Because a lot of the times persons in layman terms they just see slavery as, okay, Africans were captured, they were brought to the plantations, and they were forced to work. And they were forced to work without wages. So most of the persons who haven't studied history, that's what their entire focus on. They forced to work without wages, they were flogged, they were raped, they were beaten. And that's the physical, that's what we could see. So a lot of the time the emphasis on slavery is on the physical. And as a human being, sometimes the physical scars is much easier to get rid of than the mental and psychological. I don't know if you'd agree with me. Right, so what you find happening, you might be flogged, you have a wound, after a while you get treatment, very soon the pain would pass. The memory might linger on, but the pain would pass. But slavery is much deeper than that. And as a nation, we have to understand the psychological effects our forefathers suffered because of slavery. And if we truly want to emancipate ourselves, that is some of the healing that has to take place. Our masters, the colonial masters, the whites and such, they were very smart because they realized that the physical slavery was very easy. Because, you know, sometimes I always ask myself, hey, we have an economy or a country where you had thousands of blacks and just a few whites. And I'm wondering why it was physically possible for just a few whites to control the blacks. But the whites were very smart. So what you find happening, most of the control, the most devastating effect we had as a people is the emotional and the psychological effects. And I'm telling you, Mr. Ivan Bola says a radical. Well, I'm thinking radical also. That's where the healing have to start with us as a people. In my opinion, the bleaching of the skin by some of our people, all that is some of the psychological effects we suffer from slavery. So when the slaves were brought to the Caribbean, one of the first things they did, they made sure they had initiation. You know, it's like they tell you to take you to prison. You no longer would call Miss Peters. They will give you a number and they will give you a name. You understand? Because they want to remove your sense of identity. And that was done with the slaves. So that's why after a while they would call them chattel. And they would refer to them as cargo. So when the slaves were taken from Africa and brought to Grenada and the rest of the world, not like we had 100 persons or 200 persons. They refer to them in terms of weight. So that's one of the first steps in dehumanizing them. Other than that, they gave them the impression that, hey, if you're black, definitely something is wrong with you. Once you're black, you are inferior to the rest of the world. You are inferior to us. And, you know, sometimes when they speak about men today, and men like visiting relationship, men don't want to be in the nuclear family. That was taken away from us also. Because what you find happening, the planters recognize the strength of the family. And sometimes some of our Ghanaian men have to understand that. So you know what they did? The women and the children would live in the whole household, and the men were allowed to live in barracks. They would visit now and then. Because I trust you heard about the slave pens. Interestingly, we have a lot of slave pens in St. Patrick, where the slave were just using for breeding purposes. So what you find happening, everything that make you feel like a normal human being was taken away from our forefathers. And they were just treated as chattel. In a lot of cases, the slaves were actually treated worse than animals. You'd have pictures during slavery, or even after slavery, where you have the masters, their animals, and the slaves somewhere to the back. So I want to focus on that. Bob Marley say, if we want to emancipate ourselves, we must emancipate ourselves from mental slavery. And that is really, 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 really profound. Because in a lot of ways in our society today, we tend to see the effects of slavery. You hear persons make comments to the next. I don't like this person. They're so black. You hear black persons like me and you stating that I'm not so black, I'm fair-skinned. All those things are vestiges of still of slavery. And what I've come to realize over the years, hey, the act was passed in 1834. But yet still, the planters were not satisfied. So even though the act was passed in 1834, for 4 years they had what we call the apprenticeship system, where we were forced to work from 1834 to 1838. Because you know what? They still were trying to squeeze the last juice from you. And in 1838, after centuries of slavery, imagine you were told you're free now. You're free. You don't have nothing. You have no education. You have no property. A man just tell you you're free. Most of the slaves chose to remain on the plantation because they had no choice. And when they remained on the plantations, they were still forced to work in inhumane conditions. A few pence a day. They live in huts with no amenities. And that continued on even in the 1900s. That continued. So that's why when persons talk about Eric Gary, a lot of persons don't make any connection with slavery because our foreparents would tell you, hey, we used to work for 5 cents a day and 10 cents a day. And we were forced to work in inhumane conditions. I know my grandmother was a laborer on the estate. And I'm talking about the 70s now. And she would take work at 7, 6 in the morning. And unless this task was not completed, she cannot come home. You understand? And I understand that when the salary went up to $1 for a day, persons celebrated. And the younger persons in the room, don't let anybody fool you and tell you, hey, well, listen, when they work for $1, a lot of value. That was not true. The dollar was just basic stuff. Also, I want to emphasize the fact that the planters recognizing the effects of the psychological effect on our forefathers. You know what they did? They ensured that during slavery, that the slaves were not given opportunity to read and write. And I must say, even after slavery ended, and schools were established, they ensured still that were the whites and the elite that got access to higher education. So I tell my friends at GBSS and St. Joseph Convent St. George, those schools were established in the 1940s. These are not fire, no? These were just a few years ago, I would say. As I speak, my grandma was born in 1918. Her mom before her was born, let's say, early 1900s. Obviously, her grandmother was born in the 1800s. So for those of us who think slavery is something that is very, very far, it's not very far. And I'm telling you, so slavery is less than 200 years ago. Grenada as a nation is just 52 years old. Most modern civilizations are hundreds of years old. And what we are going through as a nation as we speak, we are still in this infancy stage. We have a lot of issues, we have a lot of things to deal with, but we have to recognize the fact that, hey, if you look at the English history, if you look at Spanish history, French history, they fought many, many different wars until they actually formed themselves. So I must say, for Grenada to be free, for people to be fully free, it will take centuries also. I also want to hone in on the fact that I would never believe that our former enslavers, as slavery ended, they put structures in place so we could be fully emancipated. The curriculum that we learn, it still has the vestige of slavery in that. The IMF, the World Bank, all those things are a form of economic colonization. Where can you imagine they would say to you, hey, when the foreign investors come in, these are certain things that we need you to do. And if you don't do it, we'll put sanctions against you. So, freedom for me, physical freedom, yes, is important. Mental freedom, psychological freedom, economic freedom, cultural freedom. It's wide and encompassing. And I believe our duty as the current generation is to lay the groundwork. We recognize the fact that it's very, very difficult to be fully free as a young nation, as persons who are still struggling from the effects of slavery. But in 2026, if we put structures in place, I believe 100, 200 years from now, when none of us will be around, we will be fully free as a nation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Andel. We could see that You were a teacher for some time. You made some very, very important points. Thank you very much. We move to our panelists who are joining us via Zoom. I'm going to pose the same question to Dr. Candia Mitchell Hall. What are the signs of an emancipated people to you?
Am I being heard clearly?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, thank you so much, moderator, for your very kind introduction, and to those joining us right there with you and those who are on our side online. Greetings to everyone. So when Livingstone reached out to me about the topic, he thought that I was already in Grenada. But I'm joining, of course, from Jamaica, and I'm happy that we have the technology that we can do so. So what are the signs of an emancipated people? I want to start from the point of history. I think that an emancipated people is conscious of their history. They are aware of it. And we know that the great Marcus Garvey once said that a people without the knowledge of their history is like a tree without roots. I think we just got an excellent history lesson from our three presenters. I think that our social institutions in particular are critical here in teaching the younger generations about themselves and how important our ancestors were, how important we are in the making of history. You know, when I think about the question in particular, I know that we're thinking about emancipation, but I also like to think about the enslaved peoples because they, within that system of being oppressed, exploited, they also had a sense of freedom. They often said, and we have archival information where some of them resisted, and they said that although the body is shackled, the mind is free. So I want to turn to resistance, and I want to locate the Grenadian experience into that kind of freedom making. The enslaved peoples themselves had, of course, an idea that they could create their own emancipation. I want to locate Jab Jab, our Black Grenadian masquerade that we see every year at Carnival. Jab Jab came out of the experience of slavery, where the enslaved peoples during what was called can brulee, burning cane, the sugar cane harvest, they would oil down their skin in the black soot, the molasses. And that was a way of mocking, of course, the plantation. It was satire. Well, at the time when they were enslaved, they could not do it directly. But once they were emancipated, by 1834, during the period of apprenticeship and after full emancipation in 1838, we would see how they would use Jab Jab to express their dissatisfaction in the society. And all of the grotesque symbologies that they use, the reptiles, the bloody mouth, and all of these things, the bling of rope and the coffins and so on, it is to show how grotesque the system of slavery was, the plantation economy in particular. I think it is important for an emancipated people to understand that Jab Jab is not devil worship, that Jab Jab saved Afro-Grenadian people from social death. The name Jab Jab, devil, devil, diable, diable, does not mean that Afro-Grenadian people who are bedaubed in the blackness are the devils. They are doing it as a form of commemoration, as a form of remembering slavery and remembering the fact that emancipation did not translate into full freedom. Emancipation was going to be a process. So Jab Jab is not the devil. It is a signifier of the devils of their existence. I want us to understand in the Grenadian society that Jab Jab is not an un-Christian element of Grenadian culture, as we have heard of it. And emancipated people recognize the significance of Afro-Grenadian struggles to emancipation, and that Jab Jab is central to that. Now, added to that, many of our speakers have spoken about decolonizing education. And I want to add that Jab Jab as a source of information, a source of resistance, should also be added on our school curricula. That our students should understand the importance of cultural performance, cultural politics, as a way in which the Afro-Grenadian people resisted on freedom and defined freedom themselves through their Black identity, to make themselves black, to black out the sun, as some of our calypso and soca artists have reiterated, right? I want us to understand that. That is critical. And you see, it is important because Jab Jab is as Grenadian as reggae and dancehall is to Jamaica. It is Grenadian as crop over is to Barbados. As Chief Chatoyer, the Kalinago chief, is to St. Vincent. It is important for us to decolonize our education and insert Jab Jab into that. You know, Mr. Andel spoke about the oppressions of history and the oppressions of slavery and how exploitative that it was. But I also think that we continue to oppress the memories of our ancestors when we do not understand that the whole point of colonialism was to control the mental universe of the colonized. You know, many of our great thinkers told us that. And one of you reiterated that. The great Marcus Garvey said that as well. And Bob Marley, you know, we have to emancipate ourselves from mental slavery. None but ourselves can free our mind. It is critical to continuously decolonize the education system. We want to see ourselves reflected in the teaching of history. It is not just about picking up arms and taking arms and resisting and burning down the plantation, but it was also done through protests, right? So when I think about the question, I think about the continuous effort of Afro-Caribbean, Afro-Grenadian peoples to reclaim a sense of freedom. And within that, I like to think about how we preserve and protect the built environment. You know, when I started my work as a historian, it was really about the built environment. My dissertation on the built environment of St. George's, the built heritage, covered our buildings, our memories, our landscapes, our monuments. And I think it is important that we preserve our built environment. And I know that there are many perspectives out there. It is very nuanced. People say that the built heritage constitutes oppressions of memory, oppressions, symbols of oppressions. And listen, that might be true, but history is not just stuck in a particular time period. History is continuous, it is living, it is processed, it is always unfinished, just as emancipation. I think our built environment symbolizes, concretizes the fact that history existed. They are living repositories of memory, living witnesses of history. And the Cathedral of the Immaculate Conception is to Grenada as St. Paul's Cathedral in London. It is Grenadian as, let's say, the Westminster Abbey, and so on. It is critical to preserve the concrete structures of the past. And with that, when I think about the question, I also think about how we reclaim and we reawaken our heroes, that an emancipated people recognizes the contributions of heroes from the past, and we heroize them. We include them in the pantheon, that when we're talking about our sense of Grenadian and our Grenadianism, we're talking about T.A. Marichaud, the father of federation, the great trade unionist. We're talking about Eric Gairy, the father of the nation. We're talking about Maurice Bishop, the revolutionary rebel, radical leader, transformative leader. It is important that we continuously heroize our national heroes in particular. And then I think about how we protect the vulnerable. Our first speaker said that he represents the farmers. And I think that we live in an age of climate change. Anybody notice how hot it is getting? And it is getting hotter and hotter, and it's not getting any better. And we have to buy ACs, although we live in the Caribbean. I think about what do we put in place to protect the vulnerable, right? We used to say in Grenada that God is a Grenadian. And we used to have all of these things that we like to say, that we're outside of the hurricane belt. And then we got Hurricane Janet, we got Hurricane Ivan, we got Hurricane Beryl, and the place is getting warmer and warmer. We're suffering from Sargassum. We're suffering from drought, lack of rain, water shortages. I think an emancipated peoples solve these problems and think about a way to future-proof the economy. How do we do that? Well, I have argued that we make a strong case, which we have been doing, for reparative justice. That a crime has been committed against humanity through slavery, and that Britain owes us a debt. So this is why I could not support England in the World Cup, and I've never been able to support England. And I was so happy today when Argentina delivered on behalf of all of us, the colonized world, and we defeated the colonizer. We have to unite and rally and continue to cry out for reparative justice. You know, somebody spoke about the legacies of slavery. And some of these legacies, we sometimes are disconnected from them. Sometimes we do not connect the dots. We have to connect the dots. The chronic health conditions, for example, diabetes mellitus, hypertension, it comes from poor lifestyle choices or a diet that we inherited from the plantation, the high starchy food, for example, right? Our poor education system. We have to decolonize our education system and remove European pedagogy out of our education system. When we think about our poor socioeconomic development, how unsustainable colonialism made us, the wealth extraction, environmental despoilage, deforestation, for example. This is why our environment is in the crisis that it is in. And this is why we have environmental vulnerability and why we live with that vulnerability today. I think when I think about this question, I think about the continuous attempts of the Caribbean peoples, of Grenadian peoples to revise, to attempt to repair and to solve the problems of colonialism and the plantation. Emancipation was never expected to be a one-moment thing. And we certainly saw that the architecture of emancipation was controlled. And we saw that the planters still controlled the architecture of freedom. They were the employers. They sat in the legislature, they made the laws, for example, and they also had the ear of the governor. They sat on the executive. So it is clear that the architecture of freedom was not put in place. The Afro-Grenadian peoples had to realize their emancipation throughout the ages as time went by in different iterations. So emancipation shows up as the fight for West Indian Federation unity. It shows up as the fight for independence. It showed up as the fight for revolution, for socioeconomic transformation. It showed up as reparations, and it is now showing up as our effort to secure a republic identity. So emancipation is continuous. And it is not only that when the people were freed that they began to put some kind of emancipatory action in place. Even while they were enslaved, they sought to resist on freedom and slavery. And so I think that an emancipated people, as I began, I would end, are conscious of all of the strands of history, that we are all significant in the making of emancipation. And we have to continue the fight because emancipation is always unfinished.
Thank you very much, Dr. Mitchell. We move to our next panelist, Dr. Damian Greaves. We ask the same question. What are the signs of an emancipated people, in your opinion?
Well, thank you very much, Madam Moderator. Thank you very much, fellow panelists, ladies and gentlemen. Well, Mr. Livingston and Madam Moderator, can I just sit in and take it all from the panelists because it was so engaging. I wonder if I shouldn't just sit back on this other side and listen all night to the wisdom, words of wisdom coming out of the panel. But I will add my little piece. The question before us, I would say, is deceptively simple. what are the signs of an emancipated people? Perhaps we should begin by asking another question. What did emancipation actually deliver? So at the end of the apprenticeship period, the formerly enslaved were told that they were now absolutely and unconditionally free. These words were monumental, but we must interrogate them. What did it mean to be declared absolutely and unconditionally free after generations of enslavement? When you possess little or no land, little or no capital, little formal education, little political power or no political power, or institutional protection. So the Emancipation Era Proclamation went further. The formerly enslaved were instructed, and I quote, "You must now entirely depend on your industry for your support," end of quote. So they were reminded that they must depend upon their own exertions for their livelihoods and the maintenance of their families. So let us pause there a little. How does a people who have labored for generations without wages suddenly lift themselves up by their own exertions? How does a people who are deliberately denied ownership now become economically independent? How does a people who were denied education immediately compete on equal terms? How does a people whose family structures, whose languages, whose identities and cultural practices were systematically assaulted suddenly enter freedom whole? How does that happen? They were being told to take responsibility for their future by the very system that had stolen their past. And while the formerly enslaved were expected to begin again with little or nothing, those who had enslaved them were compensated for the loss of what the law had previously regarded as their property. The emancipated received freedom without restitution. The enslavers received compensation without accountability. So to me, that's a contradiction. And it lies for me at the genesis of our post-emancipation journey. Therefore, when we speak or when we ask, what are the signs of an emancipated people? I say to you, with deep conviction, we cannot measure emancipation merely by the passing of time. Neither can we measure it only by flags, by constitutions, by elections, by national anthems, or the formal transfer of political authority. I would be the first to say that these are systems of freedom, but they are not by themselves its completion. Emancipation is not simply an event that had occurred in 1838, as Dr. Candia Mitchell Hall suggested and my fellow panelists. Emancipation is a condition that every generation must continue to build. Certainly, one sign of an I'm coming to the signs now. One sign of an emancipated people is our continued resistance. Dr. Candia Mitchell spoke about the reggae music, the jab in Grenada, right? We talk about calypso, we talk about carnival. Our ancestors resisted in the plantations, in the mountains, in their communities, in their religious practices, through their language, through their music, through storytelling, and the preservation of memory. They resisted the lie that they were less than human, as all of us on the panel have suggested. They resisted the attempt to transform human beings into property. They resisted cultural erasure. They resisted despair. Another sign is our extraordinary resilience. That's another sign. We survive enslavement. We survive apprenticeship. We survive colonialism. We survive economic exclusion, racial hierarchy, the continuing vulnerabilities of small developing states. We survive because something within the Caribbean, deep within the Caribbean spirit, refused to surrender. But we must be careful. A people should not have to prove that they are emancipated by demonstrating how much suffering they can endure. Resilience is admirable, but resilience cannot become a permanent substitute for justice. Survival is a sign that our spirit was never conquered. But genuine emancipation must be more than surviving systems, gentle people. They must mean more than surviving systems that continue to disadvantage us. It must also mean acquiring the power to transform those systems. And emancipated people must therefore display psychological freedom, as my fellow panelists have articulated. Psychological emancipation is visible when we no longer measure our worth through standards that were created to diminish us. It is visible when our children learn that their history did not begin with enslavement. It is visible when African ancestry is not treated as a source of shame, but as a source of identity, knowledge, and strength. It is visible when our accents, our languages, our skin, our names, and our cultural expressions are not regarded as inferior. An emancipated mind does not seek permission to believe in its own humanity. There must be signs of economic emancipation as well. Freedom must be reflected in ownership, in opportunity, and in security. It must be visible in who owns the land, who controls capital, who benefits from development, and who possesses the means to create, very importantly, intergenerational wealth. Economic emancipation means that the descendants of those who built these societies through unpaid labor must not remain permanently confined to the margins of ownership. It means moving from being merely workers in our economies to becoming owners, to becoming innovators, to becoming producers and decision makers within them, to be a people who no longer outsource our futures. There must also be signs of institutional emancipation. Like others have suggested, are our schools teaching our children to understand themselves and transform their societies? Do our health systems protect the dignity of every citizen? Do our justice systems treat people equally? Do our political institutions encourage participation, accountability, and independent thought? Do our economies serve the many or merely enrich the few? So emancipation becomes real when our institutions cease reproducing the inequalities that freedom was supposed to overcome. Another unmistakable sign, gentle people, is cultural confidence. I say cultural confidence, not just culture. And this is why our carnival occupies such an important place in the emancipation story. Carnival is not merely a spectacle. It is not simply music. It is not simply costume. It is not simply movement. It is not simply celebration. Carnival is an archive of resistance. It is the public stage upon which a people once denied visibility declare, we are here. A people once denied ownership of their bodies now move those bodies in freedom. Say what you want. A people whose voices were suppressed now sing, now chant, now drum, now speak in their own terms and to their own terms. A people whom history attempted to render invisible now clothe themselves in color, in imagination, and magnificence. So Carnival represents the embodiment of our culture and the collective expression of our creative spirit. It demonstrates our mastery of the art of survival, but also our ability to transform pain into beauty, exclusion into community, historical memory into creative power. Yet, cultural celebration must be accompanied by cultural ownership. An emancipated people must not only create culture, they must own, they must protect and benefit from what they create. So our music, our festivals, our designs, our stories, our traditional knowledge must not enrich everyone except the communities from which they emerge. So, emancipation must also be visible, finally, in our regional solidarity. Somebody mentioned federation. Dr. Candia Mitchell Hall, I was happy you did that. Because the historical forces that shape our societies did not stop at the borders of St. Lucia, did not stop at the borders of Jamaica, did not stop at the borders of Barbados, Grenada, Dominica, or any other Caribbean nation. Our history is interconnected. Our vulnerabilities are interconnected. And increasingly, our future must be interconnected. Thus, an emancipated Caribbean must possess the confidence to cooperate, to negotiate, to speak collectively in the world, not as isolated remnants of former colonies, but as nations conscious of our worth and strategic power. Ultimately, the signs of an emancipated people must be seen in whether we possess the capacity to determine the direction of our lives. Can we think for ourselves? Can we produce for ourselves? Can we govern ourselves with justice? Can we educate our children in the fullness of their history? Can we protect the vulnerable? Can we transform inherited structures of inequality? Can we imagine a future beyond the limitations handed down to us? These are the true tests. Our continued resistance, our resilience, our creativity, our humanity are undeniably manifestations of the emancipation journey. But the struggle continues. The struggle continues wherever poverty limits freedom. It continues wherever prejudice determines opportunity. It continues wherever our history is ignored. It continues wherever our economies remain overly dependent and our people remain excluded from ownership. It continues wherever we celebrate political independence while remaining mentally, culturally, or economically subordinate. Therefore, emancipation is not a destination as my fellow panelists have articulated. Our ancestors arrived on August 1st, 1838. It is an unfinished assignment that they placed in our hands. Our responsibility is to move from resilience to power, from survival to security, from cultural expression to cultural ownership, from political independence to genuine self-determination, from remembering history to changing the conditions that history created. And perhaps this is the clearest sign of an emancipated people. A people who remember where they came from, who understand the forces that shape them, who refuse to surrender in their humanity, and who possess the courage, confidence, and collective will to determine where they are going. We are not emancipated simply because the chains were removed. We are emancipated when neither the chains of the past nor the limitations of the present can determine the boundaries of the future. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Greaves. We're very happy that you did not decide to sit back and just, absorb everything from the other panelists, because your presentation was very insightful and passionate. So thank you very much. There seem to be some common themes in everyone's presentations. We talked about economic independence. We spoke about education as liberation, psychological impacts of slavery, securing our identity. We spoke about cultural ownership and confidence, resistance and resilience, and also the decolonization of the education system. So now, Mr. Bola, I'm going to go back to you. I know in your presentation you spoke about colonial powers and how they continue to dominate us. And one of the points you made was that free speech has diminished as a result. So my question to you is, many rural communities possess tremendous knowledge and resilience, yet their voices are often overlooked. So how important is it that emancipation includes listening to these communities?
Well, thank you for this question. As I said from the very beginning, that I represent the masses, the people in the outlying areas, agricultural workers. If they don't have a voice, we would have to be their voice. We have to step forward and create that voice for them, speak on their behalf, and educate them to speak for themselves. And this is why activists like myself, but Livingston Nelson, others will have to play a leading role in going out in the communities and helping these young people, educate them, and give them an opportunity to speak for themselves. This would be a serious form of personal and collective independence and self-empowerment. I want to take this opportunity, of course, to ask us all to do some serious investigation. If we don't do that, we would not be able to be a clear and powerful voice for the people that we claim to represent. I noticed in your flyer, we spoke about the future of Grenada. It will be an empty discussion here tonight if, when we leave here, we don't put serious practices in place. It's futile to just come and talk here tonight and don't follow up with some serious implementation. And I would like us to have what I would like to call a postmortem or forensic analysis of our discussion here tonight, what all the people on the panel have said tonight. We need to sit back and have a serious investigation. When there is a crime or somebody died, we ask them, what's the postmortem say? Because that's important. And we ask to do some forensic analysis, look at stuff. And Educator Andal spoke quite a lot about history. I never knew he was an historian. It's very good to have you as a fellow traveler. But what we don't do is that I, for example, don't pay too much attention to date. People are afraid of history because they don't like the dates at all. The most I remember in my dates are that Christopher Columbus sailed the ocean blue in 1492, because it rhymes when I can hold with that. But what we really do is to ask the question, what happened as a result of Christopher Columbus coming to our part of the world? Dr. Graves talked about emancipation. What happened after emancipation to our people? And what is happening to our people today as a result of the external pressures that are placed on our politicians, on our regions, unable, unwilling, afraid to stand up and take care of the masses that they are supposed to represent. So, ladies and gentlemen, forensic analysis, postmortem, very important going forward.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bola. I think that's a very important point. A lot of the times we meet and discuss and there's nothing that comes out of it afterwards. So I think that's a very good recommendation and we thank you for that. So, Ms. Chase, in your presentation, you talked about the fact that emancipation can only be attained if you're free within. You also made mention of understanding and participating in our cultural activities and festivities is a sign of emancipation. So the question that I have to you, being that you're both an educator and an entrepreneur, so you work with a lot of young people, my question is, do you think that young people are showing signs of being more emancipated or the converse?
Wow, this is a very good question. And I am going to approach it very bluntly. Yes and no. Let's start with the yes. Let's start positively first. We see the incorporation of information technology, of technology on a whole, of artificial intelligence in education. And I love to see that many students are taking full advantage of it and using it to better themselves. I love to see the zeal, the enthusiasm that many of the students have towards their education. So, yes, students, young people on a whole, they're showing signs of educational freedom or educational emancipation. But let's look at the flip side. We'll stick at technology. You and I both know what technology holds. And the way it is set up, and this is a pure example of how we are truly still not emancipated. The upper ups or the 1%, they're the one controlling all of this. And it is so amazing to see that only the negatives or most of the negatives are on the young people's algorithms. We look at the TikToks, we look at the Instagram. Why don't our young people have an educational TikTok popping up at first? No, there will be a dance or some sort of a trend. Thank you. And the trend is nothing to develop the students, nothing to develop the young people, nothing that would benefit them, nothing that would aid them. And that hampers their personality because now they are forced to join a pattern that has nothing to do with them. They are now forced to follow bad traditions. It's still tradition, although it's not our tradition, it's a bad tradition. They are forced and compelled. Forced might be a strong word, but it's forced. They are forced to follow patterns that would not make them emancipated. So they develop a lot of mental illnesses. They do not focus on who they are and how beautiful they are, how they walk, how they sit, how they talk, who am I, how I think, but they are compelled to be someone totally different. So yes, young people have the potential to be emancipated, but there are too many things that are pulling them back, too many things that are holding us, I should say, back. But we have to be stronger. And I am now calling on the older persons, the persons that we look up to, the persons with the influence in our society, to pull us up, because we need a hand up. There are so little that we can do on our own because we are following the leader. There are so little that we can think of on our own because we are young and we like to do what we are told or do what we see. Please lead by example. Please show us the right way. Please help us up. Let us be a beacon in a dark society. Let us be the hope that we may not have if we look on our phone screens or our tablet screens. Let us be true to ourselves, true to our heritage, true to our culture, true to who we are, so that when the younger folks, when we look up to you, we can see someone who is true to themselves and who are on the right path to emancipation. And note that I said path to emancipation and not fully emancipated, because we can all agree that it's a continuous process. We are not there yet, but we are on the right path. We have started. We have taken many steps to get there, and I know that once we continue, we are going to get there very, very soon. Hundreds of years maybe, but we'll definitely get there. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Chase. Okay, so now to you, Mr. Andal. You spoke to points of reluctance to learn our history, and the other panelists made mention of the need for decolonization in our education system. Now, we know that you're an educator, and so education has often been described as the pathway to freedom. And in your view, what kind of education produces an emancipated citizen?
The decolonization of education, it's a really difficult task as we speak. Because, initially we moved from GCE, which was the English exams, and we go to CXC. But yet still CXC copies a lot of aspects of the GCE syllabus. And I'm not bashing GCE. GCE to me is a very high standard. It's just that the content that we have learned most times is not directly relevant. Coming to CXC, most of the territories in the Caribbean and even some in South America, they subscribe to CXC. And because of that, it's a challenge. So for example, when I used to teach CXC history, we do different aspects of Caribbean history, not Grenadian history per se. And a lot of persons don't know that, but where Grenada is concerned, after a while, the syllabus was extended to 1985. So that covers the Grenada Revolution. So you do aspects of Grenadian history, Jamaican history, Guyanese history per se. However, that hasn't covered sufficiently what we want the persons to know about Grenada. I know just a few years ago, Dr. Nicole Dow, she did a project where she was writing a book, and it focuses specifically on Grenada history. But brother over there talk about dates. Persons call history dead man science. And a lot of persons, I don't know which teachers they subscribe to who make them focus a lot on dates, because history is not just about dates. The interesting part to me about history as a teacher or even as a student is that it gives you an idea of how things were. And then you have an idea of how it is today. And then you still could make a prediction of how it could be in the future. So that is a challenge that we have. However, in our school, other than Grenadian history per se, we must teach our kids to be independent thinkers. And to me, in 2026, we're losing a lot of aspects of that. Because for me, I could boast about that. Independence, yes. I was around since then. So as a child, yes, I witnessed independence. And I still had the pleasure of seeing the Grenada Revolution in 1979. And then we come up to 1983. This was one of the most colorful parts of our history, the most transformative era of our history, and I was able to witness that. However, if we need to progress and use education, we must be able to give everybody a voice. We have to be tolerant. We have to be able to listen to diverse ideas. And sometimes when you look on social media, you are not seeing that. Because even at the school and with my own personal kids, you must give persons opportunity to express themselves, whether or not you have diverse views. We all agree that emancipation is continuous. But I would say our leaders, our politicians, for the transformation to be really, really successful, it starts with our education system. Because you know what? An educated people would be a more tolerant people. An educated people would be people who are ripe and open for ideas. Because here, I've never been into politics, but I realize a lot of the times the politicians are caught between a rock and a hard place. Do I want to take the chance to transform the people? And next thing, they don't really understand the process and they vote me out? Or do I want to subscribe? Do I want to ensure that the little needs and wants are really satisfied? But I am saying here, and I'm saying that to everybody out there, that if you educate the people, after a while, it's easier for them to understand the process. And one person to understand the process, whatsoever plans you have for them to transform Grenada, you'll be more successful in, because they realize, okay, it's not a 2-day thing. Or I would say in local terms, it's not a eat your food mentality. We are trying to develop and we are trying to transform this nation. So I agree, yes. Education is really, really, really important where emancipation is concerned.
Thank you. Now, Dr. Hall, we move over to you. You made some very important points when you first spoke to us. You made points of recognizing our national heroes and the importance of consciousness of our history. You also spoke about resilience in depth and made mention of jab jab. So my question to you is that Grenadians, we proudly celebrate traditions, just like jab jab, but beyond entertainment, what do these cultural expressions teach us about resistance and freedom?
Oh, wow. It's a nuanced question. What do they teach us about resistance and freedom? I think that even within our present location in Grenada today, Jab Jab can teach us a lot about resistance and freedom in particular. If we listen to some of the Jab Jab chants in particular, people are speaking about their present realities. And some of it includes, paying the Jab a copper so that he can, pay his passage to hell. Some of it includes giving the Jab money. So it also speaks to post-socioeconomic conditions. Some of it speaks to conditions in the society like bad roads. I've heard Jab chants about bad roads. I have heard Jab chants about unemployment. The youth need work and they can't find work. I've heard certain Jab chants about the political, the government in particular, the political directorate wanting to change the political power, the political party in power. So I think that even when persons who participate may not be directly informed about the use of jab jab to resist historically, I think even within their own present conditions, because they continue to live with post-socioeconomic conditions that we've inherited from the past. A lack of unemployment, for example, is something that we've inherited. Poor economic structures in particular, poor healthcare conditions, bad roads, lack of opportunities, that they still speak to it. So I think that even when the community may not always understand, and in saying that, I add a caveat, because the community does understand. I have done research and I was surprised that many Grenadians said that jab jab have been used to resist and to protest conditions in the society. And we saw that during COVID-19. In 2021, we saw that jab jab was used to resist the carnival cancellation ban. And jab jab came out and sang about the poor conditions in the society. They said clearly, we're putting a jab in parliament. which meant that they were engaging in cultural politics. That is resistance, right? They said, well, we're going to put a Jab king in parliament. They said things will change in the next few years, and it was the next year, 2022, right? And we saw that change. So in my work, I have argued that Jab, it almost became prophetic. That Jab said what they were going to do. That is resistance. And I think the fact that we live in a world, a post-colonial world as well, where Blackness was vilified and demonized, but there is an insistence to blacken the skin, to blacken self, to blacken the identity, and to return to cultural expressions from the past that told us that we were ugly, or told us we were only good for plantation labor as property, as chattel slaves, is a mark and a sign of Jab's resistance and the resilience of the Afro-Grenadian people to resist all of the colonial identifiers and markers of self. So Jab is an identifier that people are identifying with their African identity, with their Blackness, and also the experience of slavery, the Black experience. We are not grotesque, Jab says. We are not the devils. It is subversive. It is mockery. It is satire. You are the devils. I do not know any form of resistance, right, that does this anywhere in the world as Jab does it. From the planning in the community, from the gathering in the community, blowing the horns, from the captain blowing the horns, from the community gathering together collectively, that this is a collective dispossession that we experience, and collectively we're going to resist together. I do not know of anything like that, and it is beautiful to watch the Grenadian people do it annually. It is also beautiful when we go back in history and we see that it was always being done. In 1838, when emancipation was proclaimed, the people came out in their Jab. Right? In 1834, when the apprenticeship started, the people came out in Jab and they contested apprenticeship because they thought that they were going to receive emancipation immediately. And they said that this apprenticeship is a mockery of their freedom, and they stoned the plantations in Grenada. Right? So the people have always engaged in this kind of resistance, and it shows the resilience of the Grenadian people. Jab has been banned several times across Grenadian history. And despite the ban, the Grenadian people insist that Jab is an intrinsic part of Grenadian identity and Grenadian culture, that now Jab is part of our national culture. People shell down to Grenada, right, to participate in Jab because of this resistance and the resilience of the Grenadian people. And for that reason, Jab should certainly be taught in schools as one of the expressions of resistance of the Afro-Grenadian people, Afro-Caribbean people, through the lens of Grenada.
Thank you very much, Dr. Mitchell Hall. I know this is a topic we'd sit and talk about all night, but we only have a few, you were right, we only have a few minutes left. So, Dr. Graves, I'm just gonna ask you one question, and we have to keep it brief because we have to wrap up. But you have served in the area of reparatory justice, and some argue that reparations are essential for true emancipation, while others believe that we should focus solely on the future. So I'd just like to know briefly, how would you respond to that?
My response is that reparatory justice is definitely something that we should pursue. We should never, it's part of our resilience. It's part of our resistance. It is one of the things that we have to do for our generations now and coming afterwards. Because everything we see around us in terms of the deprivation has to do with the genesis of enslavement of our people, has to do with the deprivation of who we were, of our humanity. So when we talk, even Dr. Candida Mitchell Hall spoke about the whole business of even our health. So in our DNA is diabetes and hypertension. Dr. Hilary Beckles has spoken about that time and time again, talking about even the medications that are produced back from overseas in North America and so on are really not the right ones for us. And that is why I said we have to stop outsourcing our future. And perhaps we need the head start, we need some help to be able to put things in place to deal with these situations. All of the pharmacogenetics now that we're talking about is proving that we are special because of the whole business of the integration of different aspects, Indian, Arawak, Carib, African, European, so that our bodies, our DNA is special. There's a lot of research going on that now, which means that in terms of even the drugs that we use are not really working well for us. And that is why I think we must now stop outsourcing our future and begin to do research in that way. And reparations will be one sure way to place in our hands the wherewithal to move forward on this.
Thank you very much, Dr. Graves. So, ladies and gentlemen, this brings us to wrapping up the discussion. Tonight's discussion has definitely reminded us that emancipation is more than just the breaking of chains. It's about the courage to think independently, the commitment to preserve our history, the discipline to build strong institutions, and the willingness to empower our communities, and the responsibility to shape a future worthy of those who fought for our freedom. May tonight's conversation inspire each of us to not just ask what emancipation means, but what our role is in advancing it. So I'd like to thank our esteemed panelists, our audience who has joined us in person and at home. We thank you for joining us for tonight's discussion. Have a good night. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for having us.
You're most welcome.
On behalf, am I here? Yes. So, on behalf of the National Celebration Committee, I would like to take the time again to thank Dr. Graves. Your presentation was extremely passionate as usual. That's your method of speaking anyway. So very well convincing. Dr. Candia Hall, Michelle Hall, we again would like to say thank you for your presentation. My brother here to my immediate right, farmer, known historian, Mr. Yvonne Bola. Again, thank you for being here. Miss Shania Chase, coming all the way. She swam, I was told, from Carrico to Grenada. You braved the waters. Thank you again for coming here to share your information with her and your youthfulness. The principal himself, well, he's always arguing, Mr. Carl Andel. So, I mean, again, thank you so very much. And, of course, a wonderful facilitator, Ms. Zelika Peters, and to you, the audience. Thank you for coming out. We really appreciate that tonight. Thank you.